Hello, hello, this is Rod, Live Within Your Means. And I just thought I'd help a few of you figure out how to get rid of your car payment. And this is a site that I put up, livewithinyourmeans.com, many years ago. Most people have never seen it, and I don't think very many people have. But this is the home page telling you the main things that you can do to really cut down on your expenses. And the biggest one is don't be afraid to buy things used. I've got another page on here, how to buy a cheap car with cash. Another one's on warning to Americans on what can happen with the devaluation of the dollar if that happens at some point. But let's go on here to this page on how to buy a car cheap. And I actually, a very interesting thing happened a few months ago, but my son called me up, and he'd actually rented a car that he was looking at having to turn back in and actually pay more than the car was worth if he wanted to buy the car. And he said, "Dad, I know you don't believe in buying cars unless you can pay cash." He goes, "But you have cars break down." And I said, "Son, everyone has cars break down." And he said, "Yeah, but you've had a lot of cars break down." And I said, "Well, I don't think I really have had that many breaking down. Certainly there's repairs that are needed, things do break down." And he said, "Well, tell me something, Dad." He knows that I've never, see this, I have never owned a vehicle that cost me over $5,000. And I'm 56 years old. So I've been driving nearly 40 years. And he said, "Tell me something, Dad. How much have you spent on all the cars that you've owned?" And I told him that of all the cars I've owned, I've spent somewhere around $40,000, give or take, because the cars that I've actually spent money on, I've at the end, for example, a car that I drove for 7 years, it was a 1999 Ford Contour. And when I bought this car, I think they were asking $1,500 for it, but it had a little bit of damage to a back door, not real noticeable. And it had the radio had a problem. One of the speakers wasn't working, and one of the windows, the driver's side window, the motor was broken. And that's something that's going to cost a few $100s to fix. And anyway, they sold the car to me for $1,200. I had no idea that that car was going to last me so long. I think it only had around 80,000 miles on it. I drove that car for 7 years, and it's kind of funny because I didn't plan on having it last that long. And what was interesting is that my father had actually pulled an old boat in, and my car was parked there in front of his house, and he didn't realize it was going to take so much room to turn. And the insurance, anyway, his boat kind of caught onto the front bumper of that car. I don't know if I say it bumper, the front corner of that car. It ripped headlight and the front grill out, and ripped things up. Anyway, he insisted that I file a claim with his insurance company, and they paid me around $1,600 for the car. And so, like several of my cars, it didn't cost me hardly anything to drive it because, of course, I paid for repairs on it, minor repairs, and I replaced a battery. I replaced the grill when that kind of stuff happened because I still drove it. I think it cost me $200-300, and to get that car back on the road, drove it for another year or two, and then I ended up giving it to a stepson, and he drove it for a year or two. And but I mean that's one of those cars that it really didn't cost me anything to drive. In fact, I got paid $400 for owning that car, aside from the repairs that I had to pay for. But you really don't need to spend a lot of money on cars, and it's kind of funny because I've heard people for years and years. I helped people as a real estate agent, and I had people saying, "You sound like Dave Ramsey. You sound like Dave Ramsey," for years. And I finally looked Dave Ramsey up and listened to him once or twice. And after I heard him just a little bit, I was like, "Yeah, he sounds like me." So, and But anyway, in fact, I heard Dave Ramsey recently tell people to buy a car that cost them 2 or 3 thousand bucks. Well, that's what I've been doing almost the entire time. Once upon a time, I'd saved up 5,000 bucks, had $5,000 in $100 bills, had 50 of them. Went into a dealer. It was shortly after 9/11. I wanted to get me an extended cab pickup. There was one that the little dealer who wanted 6,900 bucks for. And of course, I thought it was overpriced and things weren't moving for him at that time. So I offered him $5,000. And he said, oh, no, I can't sell it for that. And I said, well, that's up to you. And I had already called my son, who was a young boy at the time, and had my young daughter with me. And I went in and anyway, I offered him the 5,000. And my boy actually called me and says, Dad, are you going to buy the truck? And I said, well, it depends on whether or not this man's going to accept what I've offered, you know. And anyway, I said, you know, I'm happy to pay you $5,000 for it if you want to sell it. He's like, oh, okay, I'll do it. I'll do it. And then he starts writing some things up and wanted to sell me a warranty. And it's like, no, I don't want any warranty. And I pulled out the 5,000 bucks out of my pocket and I said, this is what I've got. And if you want to sell it to me, this is it. You know, it needs to include the taxes and everything else. And he said, oh, I'm not making much money on this truck. And I said, well, that's up to you. If you want to sell it to me, I'll give you this $5,000 and, you know, we'll be done with it. And if not, you know, then, you know, that's fine. And he sold it to me for the $5,000. And you know, that truck had, you know, I don't remember if it had a minor dent in the back or not. But if you look for a vehicle that people are getting rid of, there's a few things that you may wish to do. When you're looking for a car, find the reason when you call up on some of these cars. So this is on a site called KSL.com. We're going to click on the cars here. And this is a site based out of Salt Lake City, Utah. Extends into the surrounding states. And hopefully we're going to have this working. Oh my. Maybe we're having a little bit of an internet problem. Let's see. It's coming up. There we go. Okay. Now, one of the things that I like about this site that I think is really important is you can put a price range in here. Let's say, well, you know, I'm not really looking for anything under $2,000 today because, you know, I've got, you know, say I've got $3,000 to spend. And if you got $3,000 to spend, you know, you might even look up to cars that cost as much as $4,000. And let's say, well, you know, a lot of people are going to be getting rid of their cars. And this is how I would think here. I would say, okay, let's say that I'm over in zip code 84062, and I don't want to go more than 25 miles away, so I'd rather stay close. And let's see, $2,000 to $4,000. Do I care much about the make? Well, you know, maybe I need to get a van. Maybe I need something with multiple seats. But maybe, you know, like in my case, my kids are grown, and so that's really not a big deal to me. But I don't want to get a car that, you know, has 220,000 miles on it. So let's suppose if I look at a car and I'm looking in that range and I say, okay, a lot of people may say, oh, it's got to have under 150,000 miles on it. Well, that's understandable. But how about if I go up a little bit to 160? I bet a lot of people aren't thinking, oh, up to 160,000 miles. And what kind of car am I familiar with that I think is a good car? Well, I know that those Ford Contours were good cars, although there's probably not a lot of those around anymore. But let's see, that was a Ford, right? That was a Ford. And let's say I like Fords and I want to see if I can't find me a Ford for under 4,000 bucks. And what else? Okay, models. Let's just see if there are any Contours. They're probably going to be a lot cheaper than that. And let's see, there's Contour, but they're dirt cheap right now. Let's see, and I don't even know how long they made them, but let's just say that we look up up till, it doesn't even matter how new it is. But let's say, well, we don't want anything that's, older than a 1998. And if you go a little past where you might think, because some people are going to say, hey, I don't want anything older than 2000, and but you might go a little bit further than that because there might just be something out there with some low mileage on it that someone's taken care of, and maybe a lot of people, and probably a lot of people, are not looking at things that are older than 2000. Let's just see if there are any. We do a search here, and there might not even be any contours on the road. I don't know. It's been a little while since I've looked at those. And zero. Okay, so we didn't find any cars that actually met that criteria. But let's go back and redo our results. And I'm trying to remember it because it's been a little while since I've looked at a car, to go back and change that. We don't, I guess part of the problem that we're going to have with that is, one, it didn't look like there were any contours actually showing. And we don't necessarily need a contour. That's for sure, we don't. And we're looking for a car that runs, that meets, the needs that we have. And notice there's a bunch of cars that are coming up here that are under the $4,000 that I put in there as a top criteria. So there's a bunch of them here, and those are Fords. I don't believe I changed the make on that. But let's suppose, there's some other cars too. For example, right now I'm driving a Chevy Impala. And I know that that's a pretty good car. My brother owns a Chevy Impala. He gets pretty good mileage out of it. It's actually got 6 cylinders. I've usually driven cars that have 4 cylinders. And he's really recommended that. So I looked for a Chevy Impala. And I was able to find one that I have actually got that had a few things about it that seemed to be negative, but those were actually positive for me because I didn't mind that it has a few little things that were undesirable. And so in this case, let's see, I've got Ford unmarked. What I did is I found an Impala that had, the headlights were all milky. It needed new headlights. The light could hardly shine through them. And I was able to order online some brand new headlights for just a couple $100. And a guy helped me put those in. He didn't charge me a whole lot to put them in. And let's see if I can find an Impala. So let's say I'm familiar with Impalas. So I'm going to look and see if there's any Impalas. Now, part of the question is, yeah, it did. It pulled up some Impalas here. And when I look at that, there's 10 Impalas there that are under $4,000. And those are also cars that have less than 160,000 miles on them. And look at this, $2,700, $3,500, $2,800. 29, basically 3,000, 3,000. Here's one, $2,200. Here's a few more. $2,900, $3,900, $3,000, and $3,900. But we really might want to see if we can't find a car for $3,000. And look at this. This only has 106,000 miles on it. Now, one of the things that you may want to ask people is, when was the timing belt? That might cost you a little bit of money. When was the timing belt changed? Or does it have a rebuild engine? I personally do not want to buy cars that have a rebuild engine. If someone spent thousands of dollars to actually rebuild their engine the way that it should be done, they probably don't want to sell it for less than $3,000. And now look at this. For one reason or another, for some reason, this says it's got 65,000 miles on it. Car runs really good. Once in a while, we're going to see what the deal is on this. Hopefully it'll pull that up and we can read it. Let's look at the comments there. Oh, this has a rebuilt title, so it's been in some type of an accident at some point. That's not necessarily a bad thing. Land track, okay. A light comes on, needs to service brake assist. Land action control, rebuilt power. Okay, AC window. Okay. On my car, I had a light coming on, and there were some problems with the brakes, and I had to actually pay a fair amount to have the I'm trying to remember what they were called now, but the automatic braking. I don't know if they call it automatic braking, but the braking, the mechanisms with the brakes were fairly expensive to replace. They needed to be done after a little while. Nevertheless, I paid and had those done, and the car's running great. The car is running really well. And so anyway, this car, you may want to get something. It probably has a really good engine and transmission. It only has 65,000 miles on it. Has a rebuilt title. I guess the way I look at it is if you're able to find a car that runs good, might last you a few years for $3,000 and not have a car payment on it, that's a really good thing. And then if the car breaks down, you're usually able to save up, hopefully able to save up other money to replace it when it needs to be replaced. But what's not fun for people and can devastate a lot of people, and it happens to them all the time, is they'll have a fairly expensive car and they'll have a car payment, and that car breaks down, and sometimes major things happen like an engine or transmission. Those cost thousands of dollars. When you have a $3,000 car that gives up the ghost on you and it has a major thing like that, I would get rid of the car. I wouldn't pay to have a new transmission put in or rebuilt engine or transmission put in a car. You can get rid of the car and sell it to someone that knows how to fix them for a few $100s after you've got usually a few years use out of it. And let's suppose something goes bad in the first few months or right away, and you're out $3,000. Well, you're only out $3,000 at the most, whatever you spent on that car, and you can go ahead and buy another. Chances are, if you're willing to buy a car that's got a few blemishes in it, you can get yourself a decent car, and you can have it last for a few years, not have a car payment, not be paying that interest to the bank, and be saving up money, putting some money away in an emergency fund, so that if something goes wrong, you just go out and buy another car. If something major happens, minor repairs, you take care of them, and you get them fixed. But anyway, look at that. There's 10 different Impalas. Those are just Impalas because that's a car that I'm familiar with. And one of the most important things to ask people when you're calling them up to ask them about their car is, so why are you selling the car? And some good reasons to sell a car is we don't need it anymore. We've actually got too many cars. That's a really good reason to be getting rid of a car, and a really good reason for you to consider buying it. Because if they don't need it, chances are they're probably willing to sell it for a reasonable price. And if they just say, oh, I just want to get a better car, that's something that would make me hesitant. I'm wondering why they want to get rid of it if it's a good car. And smart people will, buy another car that is a better car when they see a good deal, something they like, and then they don't need that other car, and they'll get rid of it, and they're more willing to sell it for a more reasonable price. They're not desperate to get another car because they're worried that the transmission's going to go out or the engine's going out. And those are the cars that you want to buy, the ones that people don't need, not the ones that they're desperate to get a better car. So anyway, this is Rod. Live within your means. You're going to have a wonderful day as you find ways to save money, to live within your means, have a little bit less stress in your life. And if you get rid of that car payment, maybe you owe $10,000 on your car. Maybe it's only worth about $9,000. Sell the car. Sell the car. Hopefully you've got a little bit of money put aside. If you don't, maybe it's because you've been spending too much on a car that you really can't afford, and You can have a better day if you're going to get rid of the car you've got the payments on. Buy something that you can afford right now, and you are going to reduce some stress in your life, and it's going to help you have a wonderful day. So this is Rod. Live within your means and have a wonderful day.